Welcome in, everybody. Today we are stepping into what is easily one of the most thrilling subjects we've ever
Oh,
covered.
absolutely. It's a massive one.
Yeah, it really is. Today, our topic is a guide to trekking to Everest Base Camp.
The big one?
The big one, exactly. And we are basing our entire conversation on the incredibly comprehensive travel guide written by David Ways. He's a renowned Nepal guidebook author who has, spent years on the ground ensuring his information is entirely independent, unbiased, and just incredibly honest.
Which is so rare these days.
It really is. Now, for you listening, this is one, if not the biggest treks in Nepal. It is a bucket list item that draws people from literally every corner of the globe.
But before we get totally carried away with the excitement of the trail, we do need to make a really quick safety call out.
Right, very important. We highly recommend that you check out our previous discussion where we focused entirely on how to stay safe on this specific trek.
Yeah, we will touch on some crucial safety realities later today, but our primary mission right now is to focus on exactly how to actually complete the Everest Base Camp trek.
Exactly. We're going to give you the logistics, the itinerary, the costs, and the absolute reality of what it takes. So let's just get right into it.
Let's do it. To set the stage for you, we need to clarify exactly where you are going. Because when people talk about Everest Base Camp, they often don't realize there are actually two of them.
Two base camps.
Right. There is the North Base Camp, which is situated in Tibet, China, and then there is the South Base Camp, located in the Solo-Khumbu region of Nepal.
And the difference in the experience between those two locations is just immense.
Night and day. If you travel to the Tibetan side, you are essentially signing up for a highly restricted package tour. The infrastructure there has been developed to the point where you can basically drive almost all the way up to the camp in a Jeep.
On paved roads.
On paved roads, you step out of the vehicle, you take your photographs, and you're practically done. There's only about a one-day hike involved if you choose to do it. It's accessible, sure, but it kind of lacks that raw, immersive challenge that most people associate with the mountain.
Yeah, so when we talk about the legendary, authentic, world-famous Everest Base Camp trek, we are talking exclusively about the south side, in Nepal's Solo-Khumbu region.
Absolutely.
That is the multi-day, boots-on-the-ground adventure you picture when you hear the name. You are walking for days through isolated villages, you're crossing those terrifyingly beautiful suspension bridges over raging rivers, and you are feeling the air physically thin out with every step.
The Nepali side gives you the true trekking experience without the severe visa hassles and heavy governmental restrictions you find on the Tibetan side. You are entirely immersed in the landscape and the local culture.
It's just a totally different vibe, and I think it's worth taking a second to understand the sheer scale of the mountain you're trekking toward. Mount Everest stands at a staggering 8,848 meters.
Which is roughly 29,029 feet for the Americans listening.
Right. And the base camp you are aiming for sits at 5,364 meters. For context, at that elevation, there is about 50% less oxygen in the air than at sea level.
It is literal thin air.
Literal thin air. And here's a detail that always catches people off guard. It's the history of the mountain's discovery. People always ask you, who discovered Everest?
And the honest, slightly humorous answer is that no one did.
Right.
It didn't need discovering. The local people always knew it was right there in plain sight. It's a massive mountain. For thousands of years, the local people had their own names for it.
Yeah. In Nepal, it is called Sagarmatha, which translates roughly to goddess of the sky.
Beautiful name. And the Chinese and Tibetans have traditionally called it Komolangma, meaning Holy Mother. But in terms of Western measurement, British surveyors in the 19th century spent over 50 years trying to confirm it was the tallest mountain on Earth using these massive theodolites from hundreds of miles away in India.
Which is just crazy dedication. And the name Everest actually comes from George Everest, the British Surveyor General of India. But the funny part is, he actively argued against the mountain being named after him.
He really did. He insisted that local names should be preserved because Everest couldn't be written or pronounced in Hindi.
But the Royal Geographical Society just ignored him, and the name stuck anyway. And as for the first successful ascent, Edmund Hillary from New Zealand and the Nepali Sherpa Tenzing Norgay are recognized as the first to jointly summit it in 1953.
A monumental human achievement. Now, if you are planning to follow in the footsteps of Hillary and Tenzing to the base of this massive peak, the first major logistical question you have to answer is when to go.
Timing is absolutely everything on this trek.
It really is. David Way's guide breaks down the seasons perfectly, and understanding these windows is critical for your safety and your enjoyment. Your absolute peak months are October to November, stretching into early December.
That's the post-monsoon window, right?
Exactly. The heavy rains of the summer have washed all the dust out of the atmosphere, leaving you with crystal clear, stunning skies and incredibly sharp views of the mountains. Then you have the pre-monsoon sweet spot from March to May.
Which is also gorgeous.
It's excellent. The weather starts warming up, the rhododendron forests are in bloom, and the trails are super vibrant.
But we really need to warn you about the off-seasons. The warnings are severe for a reason. From June to August, Nepal experiences its monsoon season.
And we aren't just talking about a little afternoon rain.
No, not at all. The trails become incredibly muddy, they're prone to major landslides, and they get infested with leeches in the lower elevation.
The leeches.
Yeah, it's gross. Plus, the cloud cover completely obscures the mountains. You could hike for 2 weeks and never actually see Everest.
Which totally defeats the purpose. And then, from late December through February, you are facing brutal winter conditions. Nighttime temperatures at base camp can drop to minus 25 degrees Celsius.
And that's not even factoring in the wind chill.
Exactly. The tea houses are uninsulated, the water pipes freeze, and heavy snowfall can block the mountain passes completely. Unless you are a highly experienced, hardcore trekker equipped for extreme alpine survival, you want to avoid the deep winter and the peak monsoon entirely.
Absolutely. So let us assume you have selected your season, let's say October. Now you need to handle the bureaucratic logistics.
Right, the paperwork.
The internet is full of outdated information regarding paperwork, so we need to be incredibly precise here. You need 2 specific permits for this journey. First, the Sagarmatha National Park entry permit.
Which costs 3,000 rupees.
Yes, 3,000 rupees. You can obtain this at the Nepal Tourism Board in Kathmandu, or you can simply purchase it on the trail at the park entrance in Manjo, or at the desk in Lukla.
Very easy to get.
Second, you need the Solo Khumbu Regional Permit, which also costs 3,000 rupees. Now, if you are trekking solo, this is issued as a trek card. You obtain this in the region itself, usually at a dedicated counter in Lukla or Manjo.
And this brings up a critical point regarding those outdated sources you mentioned. You will see hundreds of older articles and websites insisting you need a TIMS card.
Yes, the Trekker Information Management System card.
Exactly. As of 2024, TIMS cards are completely obsolete and no longer required for this specific region. The local Solo Khumbu government decided to assert its own authority and replace the national TIMS system with their own regional tax.
So to be perfectly clear to you listening, do not let any agency or guide try to sell you a TIMS card for this specific trek. It is a complete waste of your money and a clear sign that the agency is either misinformed or actively trying to scam you.
Spot on. So moving from permits to physical preparation, equipment is a massive topic.
Huge.
And the absolute non-negotiable priority is your footwear. You must buy your hiking boots in your home country and break them in thoroughly for weeks or months before you ever set foot in Nepal. Blisters and poor ankle support will end your trek faster than altitude sickness will.
Wait, isn't Nepal famous for its trekking gear shops? I mean, why can't someone just fly in and buy all their gear there to save luggage space?
It's a common thought, but it's risky. While there are legitimate high-end trekking stores in Nepal, there is an overwhelming abundance of cheap, terrible quality fake gear, particularly in tourist hubs like Tamil in Kathmandu.
The knockoffs.
Exactly. You might see a boot that looks exactly like a premium brand right down to the logo, but the glue holding the sole together is totally substandard. Imagine being 3 days into a 12-day trek, miles from any road, and the entire sole of your boot peels off on sharp, loose rocks.
That sounds like an absolute nightmare.
It is. Buying fake boots in Tamil or anywhere else in Kathmandu is a recipe for absolute disaster. Your feet or your vehicle up there, you have to protect them at all costs.
Good advice. Beyond boots, your clothing strategy revolves entirely around layering. You are starting the trek in relatively warm, humid valleys where you might actually be hiking in a t-shirt.
But you are hiking up to freezing glaciers where the wind cuts right through you.
Right, so you need a solid, moisture-wicking base layer, a fleece mid-layer, and a high-quality wind cheater or down jacket. You also need trekking pants, good quality socks, and sunglasses bought at home.
Bought at home being the key phrase?
Yes, to ensure they have real UV protection rather than just fake stickers on the lenses. The sun at that altitude will fry your retinas. Also, bring a solid travel towel since the tea houses do not provide them.
Good call on the towel. But, the physical gear is really only half the battle. The question every prospective trekker wrestles with is whether they are physically fit enough to handle the journey.
It's the big unknown.
The reality of the trek is that you are doing 4 to 7 hours of hiking a day. The key word in that sentence is slow.
Slow and steady.
Going slowly is essential to avoid altitude sickness. You do not need to be an elite marathon runner, but you do need solid cardiovascular endurance and leg strength. The best way to train is stair climbing and hill walking with a backpack weighted to what you will actually be carrying.
And a surprising fact that catches a lot of people off guard regarding fitness is the impact on the knees. People naturally assume the uphill climb is the hardest part.
Well, for your lungs, it certainly is.
Right, but for your joints, particularly for folks with bad knees, going downhill is vastly more punishing. The descent puts immense repetitive stress on your patella and ligaments as you break your body weight against gravity for hours on end.
It's brutal on the knees. If you have any history of knee issues, trekking poles are an absolute requirement. They distribute that impact into your arms and shoulders.
You should also seriously consider hiring a porter to carry your main pack, drastically reducing the load your knees have to bear. Interestingly, age is less of a barrier than people think.
Oh, absolutely.
Even kids can complete this trek, provided they are mature enough to follow instructions immediately and, crucially, can accurately communicate how they are feeling regarding the altitude.
Communication is everything up there. So let us examine the practicalities of trail life, starting with how to arrange this trek and what it will actually cost you. Because the financial spectrum for Everest Base Camp is incredibly wide.
Very wide.
If you book an all-inclusive package tour online from overseas, you are looking at the most expensive route. These packages generally run anywhere from $1,600 to well over $5,000 US dollars.
And booking those online packages from abroad can often be a huge expensive trap. You are paying a massive premium for a middleman.
Exactly.
You never really know who you are trekking with until you arrive, and the fine print might exclude meals, it might limit your hot water access, or it could bundle you into a massive, slow-moving group of strangers where you are bound to the pace of the slowest person.
Which can be incredibly frustrating. If you decide to go the solo budget route, meaning hiring your own guide directly upon arrival, paying for your own tea houses, meals, and flights, you are looking at around $1,439 US dollars for a standard 12-day trip.
That's a very specific number.
Yeah.
It's a solid baseline. That $1,439 covers your permits, your round-trip flights for you and your guide, basic accommodation, meals, water, and essential daily expenses.
But the way money works on the mountain is fascinating. It is an economy based entirely on elevation.
It really is. Everything gets more expensive the higher you climb.
Because every single item, every grain of rice, every gas canister, every toilet roll has to be carried up there on the back of a porter, a mule, or a yak. You aren't just paying for the item, you are paying for the immense human caloric effort it took to transport it up to 4,000 meters.
You really have to factor in these hidden daily costs. For example, tea houses run on solar power and they will charge you for the electricity. You will be paying 200 to 500 rupees just to plug your phone or camera battery into the communal charging strip for an hour.
And a hot shower.
A hot shower, which by the way is usually just a bucket of water heated by a gas canister, will cost you 300 to 500 rupees, and that price goes up the higher you go. You also need to budget for a tip for your guide and porter at the end of the trek. That is customary and usually around 10% of their total fee.
Makes total sense. But before you can spend any money on the mountain, you have to actually get to the start of the trail.
The dreaded flight.
Right. For decades, the standard procedure was to fly directly from Kathmandu to the infamous mountain airstrip in Lukla. Lukla is famous for having this incredibly short runway carved literally into the side of a cliff.
It's an intense landing.
But we have a crucial 2026 update for you regarding these flights. Due to severe ongoing congestion at the main airport and major runway maintenance, flights to Lukla are now largely diverted away from Kathmandu to a much smaller regional airport called Ramechhap during the peak trekking seasons.
And this diversion is a major logistical shift that catches so many independent trekkers completely off guard. Ramechhap is a 4 to 5 hour drive east from Kathmandu through winding mountain roads.
It's not a quick trip.
No. The civil aviation authorities usually announce these mandatory shifts right around the peak trekking windows, specifically April through June and October through December. This means your travel day suddenly involves waking up at 2 a.m. in Kathmandu, loading into a shared microvan and driving through the pitch dark for hours just to reach the Ramechhap airstrip in time for a morning flight before the mountain winds pick up.
Which leads to a massive, critical warning. Do not try to book these flights online by yourself.
Never.
The internet is full of third-party booking sites showing direct flights from Kathmandu to Lukla. They will happily take your money. But when the routing is inevitably moved to Ramechhap at the last minute, your flight will simply be canceled.
And if you booked it yourself, you are entirely on your own.
Exactly. You will be standing in a chaotic airport lobby trying to secure a refund and fighting with hundreds of other stranded trekkers for a seat on a new flight from an airport 5 hours away.
Yeah.
Always, always use a local guide or a registered trekking agency to book your flights. They have the deep local connections and the dedicated dispatchers to get you on a plane when the weather clears, and they handle the logistics of that Ramechhap transfer seamlessly.
The thought of mountain aviation, weather delays, and cliffside runways makes many people deeply uncomfortable. And if you fall into that category, there is an alternative that is becoming highly popular. Taking a jeep or a bus to a town called Salary.
Which sits south of Lukla, right?
Correct, and then you just trick in from there.
The Salary bus is a fantastic option if you want to keep your feet firmly on the ground and avoid the stress of flying altogether. It is a long, bumpy ride, but it offers a beautiful transition into the foothills. However, there is a catch you need to consider carefully.
A pretty big one regarding time.
Yeah. Taking the bus and hiking up to Lukla adds an additional 2 days of walking to your overall itinerary. When you factor in the cost of paying your guide's daily rate for those extra 2 days, plus your own food and accommodation along that lower route, it roughly adds up to the exact same cost as just purchasing the flight.
So taking the bus is not really a money-saving hack.
Not at all. It is purely a choice about your personal comfort level with mountain aviation and whether you actually have the extra vacation days to spare.
That's a great point. Now, let us assume you have arrived safely in Lukla and are finally on the trail. We need to detail where you will be sleeping and what you will be eating. The standard accommodation throughout the entire trek is the tea house.
The famous tea houses.
Right. These are basic, family-run guest houses designed specifically to shelter trekkers. The walls are typically thin plywood, offering zero soundproofing or insulation. The bathrooms are usually shared, and as you get higher, you will likely be using a basic squat toilet. Oh yeah. But the heart of every tea house is the communal dining room, which is centered around a large stove fueled by dried yak dung. It is literally the only heated room in the entire building.
And there is a very specific, unspoken economic rule regarding these tea houses that you must obey.
Right.
If you sleep there, you must eat there.
Yes.
The owners charge an incredibly low rate for the bed itself, sometimes just a few dollars, because they make their actual profit on the meals you purchase for dinner and breakfast.
If you try to skirt this system by renting a room but then walking down the path to eat at a different lodge with a seemingly better menu, your tea house owner will significantly hike up the price of your room to compensate for the lost revenue. It is considered highly disrespectful to the local economy. You eat where you sleep.
So what exactly are you eating? At the lower elevations, the menus are surprisingly varied. You can order pancakes, pasta, pizza, and eggs. But as you climb higher and your body demands serious sustained energy, the undisputed king of the trekking diet is dalbat.
Oh, dalbat.
It is the traditional Nepali meal, consisting of a massive mound of white rice, a bowl of lentil soup, some vegetable curry, and perhaps some sautéed spinach or spicy pickles. It's the absolute optimal fuel of the Himalayas.
There is a local saying, dalbat power, 24-hour.
I love that.
It really provides the exact ratio of complex carbohydrates, proteins, and sodium your body desperately needs after a long day of exertion at altitude. And the absolute best part about ordering dalbat is that second servings are completely free.
You cannot beat free seconds.
The tea house staff will literally walk around the dining room with large metal pots and continuously ladle more rice and hot lentils onto your plate until you physically wave them away. It is a massive carbohydrate reload.
However, the guidebook issues a severe dietary warning that you really need to heed as you push higher into the mountains. You must avoid eating meat as you increase in altitude.
This is so important.
The reason is simple, highly practical, and honestly, slightly unsettling. There is a severe lack of refrigeration on the mountain.
Think about the logistics for a second. If you order a chicken curry at 4,500 meters, that meat was likely slaughtered down in the valley. It was then packed into a basket and carried up the mountain on the back of a porter or a yak for 3 or 4 days. Entirely unrefrigerated, completely exposed to the sun during the day.
Yikes.
By the time it reaches your plate, The risk of bacterial contamination is astronomical. Contracting food poisoning or severe diarrhea at 5,000 meters is an absolute nightmare that will ruin your trip and potentially put your life at risk due to rapid dehydration. Sticking to a strict vegetarian diet, primarily relying on dal bhat, is the safest, smartest way to avoid crippling stomach issues.
Hydration is just as critical as nutrition. You will be drinking liters and liters of water every single day to combat the desiccating effects of the altitude. But you cannot simply rely on buying plastic water bottles.
No, you can't.
There is an impending plastic water bottle ban in the region, designed to protect the fragile environment from the immense waste generated by tourists. Furthermore, buying bottled water gets absurdly expensive at higher elevations. You might be paying $4 or $5 for a single liter.
That adds up so fast.
The smartest, most economical, and eco-friendly strategy is to bring your own heat-proof, watertight, reusable bottles, like a Nalgene. You can pay the tea house a small fee to fill them with boiled water at night.
Which is great because it also acts as a brilliant hot water bottle in your sleeping bag.
Exactly. Or you can use water purification drops or a UV Sterapen on tap water gathered from the village pumps.
Both work perfectly. So with your permits, gear, budget, and diet fully sorted, it is time to examine the actual physical challenge of the trek itself. How difficult is it, really? We need to set realistic expectations and reassure you a bit here.
That's a common fear.
It is. But this is a trekking route, not a technical mountaineering expedition. There are no ropes needed. You do not need ice picks. There is no vertical rock climbing. You are not hanging off the side of a cliff by your fingertips.
The technical terrain is not the enemy. The difficulty comes entirely from two factors: the rough, unpaved nature of the trail, which is full of loose gravel, massive stone steps, and uneven earth, and above all else, the altitude.
The altitude is the real boss.
The lack of oxygen is the true hurdle. To safely manage that altitude and give your physiology the time it needs to adapt, the absolute core standard for this journey is a 12-day itinerary.
12 days is the medical and safety minimum. You will see companies online trying to sell you 10-day or even 9-day express treks. Any agency selling you an abbreviated itinerary is prioritizing their financial turnover over your actual life.
That's a hard truth.
Acclimatization is a biological process that simply cannot be rushed by sheer willpower. Let us deeply examine what those 12 days actually look like, day by day, so you understand the physical and psychological arc of the journey.
Let's do it. Days 1 through 3 are your introduction to the mountain environment. Day 1 involves your chaotic morning flight to Lukla. The adrenaline is high as you land. You meet your porter, load up, and begin a relatively gentle 4-hour trek down into the valley to a village called Hakding.
It feels a little deceptive because you are actually descending in elevation on the first day, walking through lush green forests and crossing beautiful suspension bridges draped in prayer flags.
But day 2 is where the reality of the work begins. You are hiking from Hakding up to the famous Namche Bazaar, which sits at 3,435 meters. This involves a brutal, steep, switchbacking climb up a massive hill that seems to never end.
It is exhausting. But it is on this climb, looking through a gap in the pine trees, that most trekkers get their very first distant glimpse of Mount Everest.
Which makes it all worth it. Reaching Namche Bazaar, a bustling horseshoe-shaped trading town built right into the side of the mountain, is a major milestone.
And day 3 is absolutely crucial to the entire expedition. You do not advance your camp. You stay in Namche Bazaar for an acclimatization day. But acclimatization does not mean you sit in bed watching movies on your phone.
Definitely not. The golden rule of altitude survival is hike high, sleep low. On day 3, your guide will take you on a steep day hike up to around 4,000 meters, perhaps visiting the Everest View Hotel or the nearby villages. You spend a few hours at that higher elevation, letting your body register the lack of oxygen, and then you return down to Namche to sleep.
This stress and recovery cycle forces your body to adapt. It stimulates the production of red blood cells while allowing you to recover in the relatively thicker air at night.
Moving into days 4 through 7, the environment shifts dramatically. You leave the comforts of Namche and push up through Tengbosch, a village famous for its stunning, active Buddhist monastery. As you listen to the monks chanting, you realize the air is noticeably thinner.
Much thinner. From Tengbosch, you push on to Dingbosch at 4,400 meters. This is a profound transition. As you cross the 4,000-meter threshold, you leave the tree line behind completely. The lush forests are replaced by the alpine zone.
It is stark, rocky, barren, and exposed to fierce winds. You will take your second vital acclimatization day in Dingbosch, repeating the hike high, sleep low process to prepare for the final push.
Day 7 is universally cited by trekkers as one of the most physically and mentally grueling days of the entire journey. You are trekking from Dimboj to a desolate, freezing settlement called Labuche, which sits at an imposing 4,910 meters. The terrain difficulty spikes sharply here. The most challenging obstacle is climbing the Lukla Pass. It is a steep, breathless ascent over loose moraine.
Reaching the top of the Lukla Pass is a highly emotional experience for many. The crest of the pass is covered in stone memorial shortens, dedicated to the hundreds of climbers and Sherpas who have lost their lives on Everest over the decades.
It is very humbling.
Walking through that memorial site, feeling the intense fatigue of the previous week, combined with the severe lack of oxygen, makes the arrival at Labuche a massive test of physical and mental endurance. Your body is struggling to oxygenate your muscles, making every step feel like you're walking through wet cement.
That grueling test brings us to the climax of the trek. Days 8 and 9. Day 8 is the big one. You wake up freezing in Labuche and begin a long, rocky push over the glacial moraine to Ramechhap, the final, highest outpost of the trek. It is essentially a sandy, frozen lake bed.
After dropping your heavy bags in a tea house, you immediately hike the final, tortuous stretch along the edge of the Khumbu Glacier to Everest Base Camp itself at 5,364 meters.
You are walking on shifting ice and rock, surrounded by massive, towering ice pinnacles. Stepping into that camp, surrounded by the yellow tents of the expedition teams if you are there in the spring, is an overwhelming, emotional culmination of months of planning and days of suffering.
It is a remarkable achievement. But what is fascinating here, and what many people do not realize until they arrive, is that the view of Mount Everest from base camp is actually heavily obstructed.
It's true, you are standing directly at the foot of the mountain, but the massive Nuptse Ridge blocks your view of the actual summit. You are too close to see the peak clearly.
That reality is exactly why Day 9 is arguably even more spectacular and physically demanding than reaching base camp. You wake up long before dawn in Ramechhap, operating on very little sleep and freezing temperatures, and you climb a prominent, steep hill of loose scree called Kalapathar. Kalapathar maxes out at 5,545 meters, the highest elevation you will reach on the entire trek.
The climb up Kalapathar is agonizing. Breathing at 5,500 meters feels like trying to run on a treadmill while breathing through a thick wool blanket.
But as the sun rises, illuminating the Himalayas, you reach the summit. That is where you are rewarded with the iconic, completely unobstructed golden hour view of the entire Everest massif, including the summit itself. It is the defining visual moment of the entire expedition.
Truly life-altering. After taking in that unbelievable view from Kalapathar, the psychological and physical journey shifts entirely. Days 10 through 12 are all about the descent.
You drop down rapidly from Ramechhap, passing back through the memorial at Lukla Pass, and head down to the village of Perichi. As you descend, the atmospheric pressure increases and the oxygen rushes back into your blood.
Trekkers often describe feeling a sudden surge of superhuman energy as they return to lower elevations. You continue descending through the forests, back through Nanchi Bazaar, all the way to Lukla. You celebrate with your guide, hand out the hard-earned tips, and prepare for the chaotic flight back to Kathmandu on day 12.
It is a phenomenal, transformative loop, and for anyone listening who might be wondering about the state of the trails after the tragic 2015 earthquake, we can firmly confirm that the route is fully open and structurally secure. Villages like Perichi took significant damage at the time, but the local resilience is incredible.
The tea houses have been rebuilt, the trails have been cleared, and the trek is entirely safe from an infrastructure standpoint.
Just for a fun, staggering perspective, let's imagine a scenario. Let's say you get to base camp. You look up at the Khumbu Icefall and you think, you know what? I want to keep going. I want to climb the actual mountain. If you wanted to summit Everest, how much would that cost you?
The numbers are genuinely mind-blowing.
To join a commercial summit expedition, it would cost you anywhere between $70,000 and $120,000 US. You are paying $4,000 just for the mandatory garbage disposal fee, $30,000 for the group's supplemental oxygen supply, and tens of thousands of dollars for the climbing permits, the Sherpa support team, and the logistics. Suddenly, that $1,400 budget trek to base camp looks like the absolute bargain of the century.
It certainly puts the economics of high-altitude mountaineering into stark perspective. Now, we've spent a lot of time discussing the awe-inspiring aspects of the trail, the history, and the logistics, but we must now focus on the final, most critical part of our discussion today, the crucial safety realities.
Yes. As we noted at the very beginning of our exploration today, we intentionally left the starkest warnings for the end to ensure they remain fresh in your mind.
The Solo Khumbu region operates under a unique, highly problematic policy that you must understand. Guides are not legally mandatory here.
I really want to dig into this because it seems entirely contradictory. In 2023, the federal government of Nepal passed a sweeping law making guides mandatory for independent foreign trekkers in almost all other major trekking regions like Annapurna and Longtang. But Solo-Khumbu, the region containing the highest mountain on Earth, exempted itself. Why on earth would the local authorities exempt the most extreme environment from a national safety mandate?
The exemption is purely driven by local politics and economic pushback, not by any rational safety assessment. The local authorities in Solo-Khumbu argued that a national mandate would hurt their specific tourism numbers, and they asserted their autonomy to govern their own trails.
It creates what David Weiss accurately calls the no mandatory guide illusion.
It really does. It gives independent trekkers an incredibly dangerous false sense of security. The psychological concept at play here is the normalization of deviance. Trekkers arrive, they see the government doesn't require a guide, they see a few other solo backpackers on the trail, and they think, well, if the law says I don't need one and that guy over there doesn't have one, it must be totally safe to do alone.
But that logic is fundamentally flawed and incredibly dangerous. The Solo-Khumbu is absolutely not safer than the Annapurna region. It is harder, the elevations are significantly higher, the terrain is far more remote, and trekkers are vastly more exposed to life-threatening altitude sickness.
Every single year, independent, unguided trekkers go missing or lose their lives because they wildly underestimate the environment. They take a wrong turn in a sudden snowstorm, they slip on a shifting glacier, or they succumb to altitude sickness in communication blackout zones where no one knows they are in trouble.
And this false sense of security is heavily supercharged by modern online hype. Before arriving in Nepal, trekkers go on YouTube and they watch these glossy, highly edited videos of smiling influencers in light jackets easily walking to base camp, accompanied by an upbeat motivational soundtrack.
Exactly. But what you do not see in those videos is the hidden reality. You don't see the highly paid, licensed guide walking just off camera who arranged all their accommodation and navigated the trail. You don't see the local porter carrying their heavy 20-kilo backpack, allowing the influencer to hike effortlessly with just a camera.
And most importantly, you don't see the 3 days of miserable, throbbing altitude headaches and nausea that got completely cut in the editing room because it didn't fit the aesthetic.
The mountain does not care about your aesthetic. The mountain is an indiscriminate force of nature.
Furthermore, if you are seeking advice online, you have to be incredibly wary of fake Facebook groups. The guidebook highlights a disturbing trend where dubious trekking agencies create official-sounding Facebook groups dedicated to Everest trekking. They populate these groups with fake profiles posing as experienced independent trekkers.
These fake profiles give out terrible, unsafe advice specifically designed to confuse independent trekkers and ultimately funnel them into buying the agency's overpriced, unsafe services out of desperation. Taking critical safety and medical advice from a stranger on the internet who knows nothing about your personal medical history or fitness level is a gamble you absolutely cannot afford to take at 5,000 meters.
The obvious solution to all of this risk is to hire a guide. But the guidebook makes it clear that even the act of hiring a guide has a dangerous trap. A lot of budget-conscious trekkers will fly into Lukla, step off the plane, and just hire a random guy off the street who offers to guide them for $5 or $10 cheaper a day than an agency would charge.
We cannot stress the danger of this enough. There is a massive, fundamental difference between hiring a properly licensed, medically trained, insured guide from an agency in Kathmandu versus picking up an unaccountable street guide in Lukla.
The difference between those two choices can literally be a matter of life and death. The guidebook vividly highlights the tragic Kongmala incident to illustrate this exact point. A Korean trekker flew into Lukla and hired an unlicensed, uninsured street guide simply to save a marginal amount of money. The trekker chose to attempt the Kongmala Pass, which sits at over 5,500 meters.
And when the trekker began suffering from severe, debilitating altitude sickness near the top of the pass, the so-called guide simply abandoned him. The street guide had no legal obligation, no professional credentials, no emergency rescue insurance, and no professional accountability to an agency. He panicked, left the client on the mountain, and walked away. The trekker tragically died of exposure and altitude sickness within hours.
That is an absolutely heartbreaking story, and it is entirely preventable. A licensed guide trained in Kathmandu is a professional. They are trained to constantly monitor your behavior, your speech patterns, and your breathing to recognize the early, subtle symptoms of AMS acute mountain sickness.
They have the professional authority, the training, and the moral duty to look you in the eye and say, your health is failing, we are stopping, and we are descending right now, regardless of your summit goals.
That leads us directly into discussing AMS itself, which is the single greatest non-technical risk you face on this journey. Acute mountain sickness can affect up to 50% of trekkers who ascend above 3,500 meters. We mentioned the golden rule earlier: hike high, sleep low. But there is a massive misconception we must shatter right now. Your physical fitness offers zero immunity to AMS.
None. An Olympic marathon runner with perfect cardiovascular health can succumb to AMS at 3,500 meters, while a sedentary office worker might feel perfectly fine all the way to base camp. It is not about fitness, it is entirely about your individual genetic predisposition, and crucially, how slowly you allow your body to ascend and adapt.
So what does it actually look and feel like? The onset is insidious. Symptoms start as a mild headache, a feeling of unusual fatigue, or slight dizziness. It feels exactly like a bad hangover. If you experience these symptoms, the protocol is absolute. You do not ascend any further. You rest. You hydrate.
If the symptoms progress to vomiting, a severe splitting headache that painkillers won't touch, or a loss of physical coordination where you are stumbling like you are intoxicated, you have moved into severe AMS. At that point, you must descend immediately. Waiting until morning can be fatal.
The guide highly recommends bringing a simple, lightweight pulse oximeter with you. It is a small device that clips onto your finger and measures your blood oxygen saturation level. If your reading drops below 85% while resting at altitude, that is a massive, objective red flag that you and your guide need to address immediately.
If severe AMS is ignored, it can rapidly develop into high-altitude pulmonary edema, known as HAPE-E. This is a terrifying physiological condition. Because of the immense changes in atmospheric pressure and the lack of oxygen, the blood vessels in your lungs constrict. The pressure becomes so great that blood plasma literally leaks out of your capillaries and fills your lungs' air sacs.
You are effectively tragically drowning on dry land. You develop a wet, gurgling cough, your lips turn blue, and you cannot catch your breath even while completely at rest.
If the worst does happen and you or a fellow trekker suffer a severe medical emergency like HAPE, your only option is a rapid helicopter evacuation down to a hospital in Kathmandu. But this life-saving necessity leads us to our final critical warning of the day: the infamous helicopter rescue scams.
For over a decade, some highly dubious, unethical trekking companies have offered rock-bottom prices for base camp packages. They operate at a massive loss on the trail, fully planning to make their profit by colluding with corrupt helicopter dispatchers. They will look for any excuse, a mild stomachache or a minor headache, to fake a severe medical emergency, force you onto a helicopter, and cash in on a massive, unnecessary rescue bill directly to your travel insurance.
To protect yourself from falling victim to these scams or from being financially ruined by a legitimate rescue, you absolutely must ensure that your travel insurance specifically and explicitly covers high-altitude helicopter evacuations up to your maximum planned elevation. Do not assume standard travel insurance covers you.
If your policy fine print only covers you for trekking up to 4,000 meters, and you contract HEPE and need a rescue from base camp at 5,364 meters, the insurance company will entirely deny the claim. You will be on the hook for a $10,000 helicopter bill upfront, in cash, before the pilot even starts the rotors. You must check the fine print, call the provider, and make sure you are covered for at least 6,000 meters.
Preparation is everything. Having a qualified, licensed guide, securing the correct high-altitude insurance, understanding the physiology of your own body, and maintaining a deep, abiding respect for the altitude ensures that your Everest Base Camp trek remains the magnificent adventure of a lifetime rather than a tragic cautionary tale.
The knowledge we've unpacked today is specifically designed to empower you to do this right. To that end, we cannot strongly enough promote David Wei's incredible platform. If you are even slightly considering undertaking this trek, you must check out the Longest Way Home Nepal travel website and his comprehensive guidebooks.
Specifically, his Trekking in Nepal guidebook is an absolute masterpiece of independent travel journalism. These are the most updated guidebooks in the world today. They work entirely offline on your phone, or you can purchase them in print, providing scalable, highly detailed maps and real-world logistics that absolutely are not sugar-coated by commercial interests.
It is a resource that prioritizes your safety, your budget, and your actual experience over industry spin. We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We've explored the freezing temperatures, the grueling climbs up ski slopes, the shifting glaciers, the heavy financial costs, and the absolute physical and psychological toll this specific mountain demands of anyone who dares to approach it.
It's a lot to process.
It is. So we want to leave you with a lingering, provocative thought to ponder long after we sign off today. In a modern world where every single corner of the globe is mapped by satellites, fully digitized, and instantly accessible from the comfort of our heated living rooms, what does it genuinely say about human nature that we are still so powerfully, irresistibly drawn to a remote, oxygen-deprived rock at the top of the world, willing to risk our comfort, our finances, and absolutely everything else just to stand in its shadow?
A great question.
Think about that as you plan your own adventures. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey. Stay curious, stay safe, and we will catch you next time.